Well, happy Monday here. Welcome to the Markcast. Got the banner going this week. Went the entire episode last week. Was so distraught with the Lions' loss. Didn't get the banner going. We have it here. Had the Mariners not gone 15-2 against the Kansas City Royals on Saturday, I might have thrown my phone through something, injured myself, someone else. This is a rough weekend, guys. How are we doing?
I'm doing good, Reed. Really exciting week of games, and really excited to get into it this week.
Yeah, I noticed your big, bold Tiger Cats uniform. Appreciate that. I don't have my BC Lions hat on right now. Mariners deserve my headspace, so not BC Lions. Evan, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. I mean, what a week. What a time to be a fan of this league and to be involved. I mean, yeah, it was – I think, the slate in general was it was mixed, but I think there's one reason that stands out that we're about to get into. I don't even have to say it. I don't want to be the one to say it, but that makes this week stand out above all the others that we've seen so far.
Yeah, Tim's talking here. Tim, we got the Alouettes flight deck. Yeah, we'll talk Elks. We're going to talk Lions. First off, just off the top here, before we get into everything, teased it last week on the show, recorded an exciting interview this Friday. Proud to announce that our commissioner, Randy Ambrosi, coming back on the podcast, had a great conversation with Randy late last week. I think this was good. This is the third time he's been on. I think Randy's got some familiarity and, okay, what is a Markcast? What is going on? I asked him if I could call him a friend of the show. We talked about Victor Quee's departure. We talked about what does Randy want his legacy to be as CFL commissioner. So this is good. This is good. About 17 minutes with the commissioner. So hope you are subscribed. Are we excited, gentlemen? Is that going to be good?
No, that'll be a highlight of the season for sure.
Yeah, Randy looked nice. He had a nice jacket on. He complimented my shirt. He said, "Oh, you look really good too." So I think Randy and I are we're basically like best friends now. So maybe Randy could join us on one of these episodes. All right, so guys, do we want to talk Elks here? I'll get the game up. Oh, we finally did it. Band-Aid off, everything else. I watched this game start to finish. Dorothy was coming home from a girls' weekend. I guess we'll go first. Evan, what did you make of this?
Yeah, well, it finally happened. For so many weeks it was, I'll see it when I believe it, and now I can finally believe it. Just so strange to me. I mean, before we really get into the game, first home game after Victor Quee is gone and they do this. I can't. It's almost like that's the part that I really can't believe. Like the Elks, past couple weeks have been trending in this direction. I think we've talked about it. They've made progress. We'll get into, Trey Ford and everyone that we've talked about ad nauseum this season. But they've been making progress. This was in the works. Now, we didn't know. I mean, the Victor Quee stuff was extremely sudden. We didn't know that was going to happen. And it kind of happened right in the middle of this sort of like they were starting to get where they needed to go. And now they finally got over the biggest hurdle. Of course, still a lot of work to do this season. Still a lot of, games to win if you want to call this somewhat of a success. But it's something, it's something, and it must feel so good. If you're an Elks fan, you're from Edmonton, you live in Edmonton, you went to the game, whatever. It must have been a great feeling just being there and experiencing that for the first time in, just about 4 years. It was October 2019 and we're coming up on September 2023. So I don't know. It was so nice to see. And I think we all figured it was a possibility, but just to actually see the final score, with the Elks on top at home, you can't write it any other way. It was great.
Yeah, Hussey, this is, the Elks losing streak has existed before the Markcast was the creation. Just to welfare check here. What did you make of this as a longtime fan of the league?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that it is predated the existence of my channel as well. So, just so happy for all the fans out there that they no longer have to carry around this burden of, this ginormous losing streak. And I think that just to talk about my experience watching this game, I didn't get to catch it live. Of course, I was actually working last night. So I actually stayed up to watch the rerun on TSN, 2 a.m. Eastern to 5 a.m. Eastern. So that's commitment for you. They wasn't posted on demand yet. So that's why I ended up doing that. So had to go witness history. And that was my experience watching the game. And I'm just so happy that they were finally able to do it.
Yeah, I got here. We'll get the box score and all that. Yeah, Evan was talking. I thought this was not, I mean, funny isn't the right word, but Victor tweeting out last night, incredibly happy for the players, fans, coaches, and staff who've been working hard for this win. Congratulations. I mean, I have to imagine, I mean, Victor Cui, Edmonton hometown fan, man, still incredibly excited for all this. I mean, he's still a part of the community and everything. I mean, we make jokes about him and kind of the departure and everything else from that, but he has to be excited about that. I mean, like Evan said, we saw it trending in this direction. They got the win last week, all the pieces together. Trey Ford here, pretty remarkable stat line, 15 of 18, many scramblings, and then 1 TD, 0 interceptions, clean game. Evan, what did you make of Mr. Ford's performance?
I mean, this was his most complete game of the season. There was a lot of talk about I don't know who you had on your show, Reed, that said it. It might have been Naylor, who was talking about, Ford, looks like the guy, he's making progress, but he's got to win, and he's got to stay consistent. Now you're finally starting to see a bit of that consistency on both sides where they can win games and he can put together a very solid performance. And this was above average. I mean, 317 yards on 15 completions. You don't see that very often. Really just all around, I think, this – again, we've talked about Trey Ford so much. I don't want to make the entire show about him, but just while we're on it, Trey Ford, I think we've all kind of, been pounding the fist on the table for him. And, there were a lot of questions still. I remember, when Taylor Cornelius was starting, we would always talk about, well, we'd like to see Trey Ford, but that's still not, that's still not a solidified option or anything. There's still a lot to work around. There's still a lot of, things that they have to develop. So the fact that he's doing these performances so quickly, I think is a sign of just how prepared he really was. And, I don't think, I think we can still all agree that he should have been playing earlier in the season. I really don't think that's up for debate because, he's been like at this rate. I mean, if they keep this up, I mean, they could really finish the season looking respectable. I'm not going to say good because it's already been, way too much bad, but they could finish looking respectable. There's still time to save this thing with Trey Ford at the helm. And that doesn't mean, we're already out of playoffs. We're already, looking at possible coaching changes for next year. Those things might not be saved, but putting together a decent product on TSN or CBS Sports Network or whatever, that is still a possibility. And I think for the Elks, that's a huge win right now.
Yeah, that was Naylor talked about it. I think it was I can't remember if it was pregame or at the halftime, but he was saying, he kind of views the CFL season as, if you're playing golf and you got the front nine and the back nine. And he said, hey, Chris Jones is 1 for 1 right now on the back nine and kind of had half a season to get this together. I mean, especially with, the Lions kind of poo-pooing right now, everything else. Hussey, they're really not that far out if all things are being equal, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said, it just really comes down to, the state of the playoff race and all these other struggling teams right now, specifically the Calgary Stampeders, who the Elks could even leapfrog in the standings with a victory in the Labor Day game next week. So really excited for that. That's another point I wanted to bring up is that the Labor Day games now look to have a lot more juice to them that they didn't look like they had prior to this week. So really excited for that weekend. And I think that the thing, just to piggyback off of Evan here, I think that, the thing with the quarterback play in Edmonton is that, not that it was just, slight improvement from Trey Ford. It's really a night and day difference. And I think that it's really opened up that entire offense. Maybe some of it is the offensive coordinator change that they made a couple of weeks ago as well. But I mean, like I said, it's just night and day. And I think that you're seeing lots of, bootlegs off play action. It's putting a lot of stress on defense. Obviously, CFL defenses are just not accustomed to dealing with a quarterback as fast as Trey Ford, and he's taking advantage by hitting a lot of big plays out there. And you saw that in this one. Ottawa has really struggled with giving up big plays over the past month or so. We've talked about it many weeks now on the show, and Edmonton was able to take advantage of that and get that first win.
Yeah, this Monday, September 4th, I got the schedule pulled up here. Tremendously exciting for that. BC here at Montreal. Tim Copper in the chat talking about how the Lions have a new throwback cap available. Tim, I save my money for winners. I save my money for winners. Maybe when we come in again, like we did a couple years ago, beat the Montreal Alouettes at home. I remember we had that bet where you had to change your logo on the podcast to a BC Lions logo. So maybe we could go get one of those again. But I have no faith at all right now in that. Yeah, I had the tweet up, just whatever highlights doing this, showing Trey Ford and everything else. Like Gino looked great. He was back, worth every penny. It really felt like there was still some Elk stuff in there. We saw some penalties and the too many men, and we're still working through kind of discipline issues like that. But it feels like they're getting here. Evan, how are you feeling here? Steamrolling here? Are we building, 2 games in a row now, building momentum?
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. Everything looks good right now is the bottom line. I think we can all, I mean, there's no denying this is the best part of the Elks season. This is the best that the Elks, I think, have felt in a long time, because even in seasons prior where maybe they won a couple games and did some cool things, nothing feels as emotional as this does. And again, I'm not an Edmonton fan. I really have no connection to the Elks organization, but I can only imagine, again, for the guys like, Dave Campbell, who I always bring up, guys that like put so much time and effort into that league. I can't imagine what it feels like right now to just feel like you've done something. You've at least, made a dent in the season and made an impact. And, there's at least some positivity, because for way too many weeks, and honestly even years, because I mean it's been a couple seasons of lackluster performances for the Elks. It's just been way too much negativity, and I always tried to look at the positives. I think when we've talked about the Elks in weeks past, I've always looked at the team and tried to point out things. Well, they have this guy X player who can do X thing, and that's good for the future, right? For when you're trying to build something next season with whoever's there, and it's obviously going to look a lot different still. But yeah, I mean, I'm just again really, really happy, and how could you not? I mean, I think the only people who were frustrated about this were Ottawa fans, but I think the rest of everyone else involved in the CFL was just kind of cheering Edmonton on, because again, it needed to happen. It needed to happen. It was dragging on for so long, and it was again becoming a point. We've talked about this before too, where it's not just hurting the city of Edmonton and their football team, but it hurts the entire CFL as a whole.
Yeah, I got the highlight up here. It looks like Trey Ford's doing his best Nathan Rourke impression. We matter, guys, the CFL, because Nathan Rourke is playing in the NFL now, and then we can call. I had tweeted that previously. I didn't have the clip ready. I said, if Nathan Rourke does this play, Twitter breaks. It's the same thing when you see that, like Patrick Mahomes, if he does any of this stuff. I did think it would. Oh, that was what I was going to say. Like with the whole Ottawa thing of it all. And Jason, you probably know more about this than I do. Like the Ottawa fan base, like what is the mindset of the Ottawa fan base? I know we have Jenna, a longtime friend of the show, and she's a Red Blacks fan, but I can't imagine like the strong lineage that is an Ottawa Red Blacks fan. I mean, can you put me in the mindset here? What does it feel like to be, if you're an Ottawa Red Blacks fan in 2023?
Yeah, well, it's tough because when the franchise originally came back in 2014, they had some pretty immediate success. They had the very poor first season, and then I think it was 3 Grey Cups in 4 years, appearances, that is, and then they won it in 2016. But the last 4 years have really just been dreadful. They've been really just as bad as Edmonton has been the last 3 years, and I think that, it's sad because earlier this season, they have the 2 dramatic victories over Winnipeg and Calgary. Looks like they're turning the corner. Looks like Dustin Crum may actually be something, but he's clearly regressed as defenses have found a way to take away that running element, or at least limit that running element of his game. And I think that, I think it could be another lost season here now that they're 1 game behind Hamilton. I think they're 2 games behind in the loss column. They played another game, then 1 more game than Hamilton, and they actually play Hamilton after they come back from their bye week next week. So that is a huge game for them. And I think that as for their fan base is concerned, I think that they have a pretty loyal fan base. I went to a game a couple of weeks ago. Really good turnout for that one. They're still drawing around 20,000 people, and that's pretty remarkable considering it's a East market, and it's also a team that struggled for the last 3 years, like I said. But yeah, it's hard to there's not that much of a history, like you said, because they've only been around for basically 10 years here, and it's hopefully they get it turned around soon.
I speak about this as someone that's like a Seattle Sea Dragons fan with all of, with all 5 home games under our belt. Yeah, Evan, what do we make of it? Yeah, Dustin Crum, Hussey saying he's regressed. It certainly feels that way. We kind of had the initial spark. What do you make of Ottawa?
Yeah, they're in a tough spot right now. I mean, you could honestly argue. I mean, well, Edmonton's got a long way to go, but like so does Ottawa. And the reality is, like Jason said, we talk so much about Edmonton because it looked so much worse for them and the media was on them a lot more. But like Ottawa had a pretty long home losing streak too, and their past couple of seasons have netted next to nothing. So really, it's almost, I mean, I'm not saying we should lay into Ottawa more. I don't think we should be laying into anybody. We don't really have the right to do that. But like, come on. I mean, those guys have their issues, and those issues clearly are continuing. Now, this has been an extremely unexpected season for Ottawa, just like it was for Edmonton, but perhaps even more, because I think Ottawa had a much different direction in mind, whereas Edmonton still knew that they were going to be rebuilding. They just thought they'd have a couple more wins under their belt by now, I think. But, I mean, you look at Ottawa, like they lost a lot early on, and the season outlook is already, I think, so different than from what anybody there expected on both the staff, personnel side or whatever, and the fan side, again, talking about the fan base that you brought up. I just think it's a bit of a different projection. And at this point, I mean, they had a couple games kind of like what Edmonton's doing here, like they had that overtime thriller against Winnipeg. That was probably, maybe my favorite game of the season, just going back on things. And I've brought that up a lot on the show. They've had games like that. They've kind of reached their peak as well. But that's dropped off again. And now they're sort of experiencing, they're really at a point where their season's, it looks like it's almost over, especially with what Hamilton did against BC, which I know you don't want to talk about, Reed, but we'll get into that eventually. Just with all that in mind, I think, the outlook doesn't really look good here. And as sad as it is, and there was hope. There was a lot of hope, I think, for Ottawa, even when, things were at their worst, when Jeremiah Masoli was injured and everything. There was hope, but now I think you're already starting to, turn the page and looking at next year, which is a hard pill to swallow. And I don't think, again, there's still a lot of season left. You never know. I mean, you just never know what could happen. I can't rule anything out, but I think we can all say right now, things don't look great for that team in terms of their success this season. It's almost like you're starting to get to that point where you're like, okay, what's 2024 going to look like? Who are we keeping around? Who might not be here anymore? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that Winnipeg game feels like a lifetime ago at this point. I mean, it really does. And it felt, I remember we had on whoever it was that week. I can't even remember, talking, and it was, when I had Steve Simmons on, and he's like, this weekend was like arguably the most entertaining of the CFL season thus far. But he's like, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, because we have all these unknown quarterbacks and people are getting hurt and kind of all that other stuff. Andy Murray has a comment: under Cornelius, it was 15 points per game. Under Ford, 27.6 points per game. Louis is saying, Professor Andy Murray hit the nail on the head. Jason, any other football-y stuff? I have some funny comments to bring up about this one before we get out, but do you have more football stuff?
Yeah, one point I want to bring up about Trey Ford that I don't think gets talked about enough is that Trey Ford has been playing Canadian football his entire life. And, compared to these other American quarterbacks that come up here that are learning a brand new game, I think that it's really helped Trey Ford's transition into the CFL. And obviously that athleticism as well has helped him have success early on here. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's something that's not brought up enough about him.
Well, and Dunnigan had a really good quote from him on the color commentary where he said his mind is going faster than his legs. So it really does feel like he's able to process a little bit more, I guess, with probably brings up your point where he's been kind of in this system and, he's not coming in fresh like a Dustin Crum here and, okay, what's going on? And I have to learn this game. I mean, I've talked with Naylor about that, how, it really takes a couple years to get people figured out. I had showed this tweet earlier. Steven, friend of the show, I met him back in Regina last year. Trey Ford showing the league how dumb Edmonton coaching staff has been keeping him on the bench as long as they did. I did have this was a funny thing too. So Morley Scott, friend of the show, tweeting out the Edmonton concession stands. I'm very impressed with the bacon cheeseburger we had, and Dave Campbell saying this is a winner. I privately messaged Dave. I said, I think we know why Victor Cui was dismissed from the Edmonton Elks. If this was your big concession, I go, I just got home from T-Mobile Park. We have like $20 slices of pizza and like sushi hot dogs and everything else. We have the Morley Scott bacon cheeseburger. And then from my poll, this one didn't circulate very well, but it really did seem like people were all in on free Trey Ford here over Crum Sanity. Evan, anything else on this one? I had the Jalen Hurts too, or he was wearing, they were showing that during the game. And we matter as well because Jalen Hurts was wearing a CFL expansion team. I guess his dad played for them back in the day. Evan, anything else on this?
Yeah, just touching on Trey Ford again really quickly. Jason, you said, he's a Canadian quarterback, so he comes into the league with an advantage. I think that's true, but it's been tough for him because I feel like with that advantage, you have to capitalize it. You have to capitalize on it quickly to kind of set yourself apart from the American quarterbacks. But Trey Ford just hasn't gotten the playing time, so we haven't seen a lot of him until now. I mean, again, I'm sure like things again are trending in the right direction. It certainly looks like he could have a very good season from this point onward, assuming he starts in every game, doesn't get hurt, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting discussion to be had about Trey Ford. Like maybe if we don't look at it from this season, but we look at it from 2024 and beyond, what his outlook really looks like, as a quarterback, and how he could set himself apart by being a Canadian. I think he already set himself apart when he was drafted that high as a Canadian quarterback, a first-round pick. I think he was 8th overall in the CFL draft to Edmonton. So, he's already set himself apart in that sense. But it will be, Trey Ford is one of those guys that could have one of the more interesting and perhaps, again, outstanding careers in the CFL as time goes on. I would certainly hope so.
Anything else on this one, Jason? You want to move on?
Yeah, let's move on to your favorite game to talk about this week.
Well, and so I had I thought the Winnipeg Blue Bomber, they are doing tremendously well with the social media right now. Live look at the standings after week 12 here. I was working. I had a wedding, one of our last of the season here, watching the score come down, and I'm like, what the hell is going on in this game? This should be such a cakewalk. I don't understand it. I was messaging with one of my CFL people Saturday night. I don't know if it's like the culture is the right word or a locker room issue. Like there is something wrong with the BC Lions right now. And it was kind of like, okay, we can't get up for the away games and we play worse on the road. Now, I mean, this is a cakewalk victory. This is okay. Thrill the hometown fans, come in. Like Rick had his his post game. Like I think they're a very good football team. We are not a good football team today. Like I don't know at what point like does Rick start taking accountability here? Like we can't just whitewash these games every week. Like okay, we got to move on. I mean, we had our druthers last week with how bad this was. I mean, I guess we'll go first to Evan. Like this just feels like the Lions are falling apart. We're 7-4 now, and these are very, very winnable games.
Well, I don't know if falling apart is the right term. It certainly looks like that right now because the Saskatchewan game was a surprise, and then this was. I would even say this was more unpredictable than Edmonton winning at home, which is saying a lot because that was the sort of I'll see it when I believe it scenario. I mean, this was a shocker, and BC, like the whole thing was they don't lose at home. They struggle on the road a bit here and there, but they don't lose at home. Now they've lost at home, so. That red flag that we talked about last week, like, okay, maybe you've got a couple tweaks to make, is now elevated because you've lost back-to-back games, both home and on the road, and both of those games were extremely winnable. We all know that. Anyone who watches the CFL on a regular basis is going to know that. Me personally, I don't think they're falling apart. I still think they have the right personnel. I still believe in Rick Campbell as a coach. We love Ryan Phillips, a defensive coordinator. All the pieces are there. I think they're just getting too comfortable. That's the best way I can put it. I think they've been so accustomed to success. And I'm not saying, they're accustomed to success, but at the same time,
7 games. You've won 7 games. Like, this isn't like a dynasty here.
No, I know, but that's what I'm getting at, because
while
they are a good team, not just in the West, but across the CFL, they still don't have the championship pedigree that teams like Toronto and Winnipeg do. And that's the difference here. That is sort of the one. I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where there's like those, it's like the 3 dragon heads, and there's the one dragon that looks like really like goofy, you know what I mean, with the face. I could try and pull it up later. You can try and pull it up, but that's what I think about of the Lions right now. I'm not saying, that's the one. I'm not saying that's what I necessarily think of them, like the team as a whole, because I love that team. Again, we just praised the personnel. We praised all the things that they have. But the reality is, like, they haven't gotten to the point that these other teams, in the CFL, like Winnipeg, I think has a different sort of discipline. And I think Toronto's getting to that point too, but specifically Winnipeg, and we'll get into their game against Montreal, but I think that was a great example where every time you think Winnipeg is going to lose or do something stupid, they don't. They change your mind, they'll change on you, and they win the game. And usually they win it in dominant fashion, as they did this weekend. I'm not going to get into a big tangent about Winnipeg here, because that has nothing to do with the game that we're talking about. But again, my point being, BC, while they are a good team, they are still in some uncharted waters. And I think maybe that sometimes, I'm not going to say that they get carried away. I think it's just these quick little mental errors that add up. Again, you're getting too comfortable. You think that, because you haven't lost at home until now, and, everyone's been saying good things about you. Everyone, I think, really likes the culture. So there's been a lot of praise. I think some of those guys might have just settled down a bit and they weren't on their toes. And then a team like Hamilton comes in and takes advantage of that, because we all know how hungry Hamilton is. I went on the show last week saying Hamilton could go to the playoffs, and everyone was like, I think, that was like the least popular option against Ottawa and Calgary. But I mean, look at Ottawa. Like they just lost to Edmonton. Things really aren't looking good there. I figured Hamilton could do something like this, because while their team has changed a lot and their aggression has changed a lot, like I think the overall mentality there is different compared to when they were competing for Grey Cups. The reality is they still have a lot of those guys. Like Orlando Steinauer was the coach that was there for the 2 Grey Cups. He's still there. Like they still know how to be in certain positions and take advantage of certain things. That's not even something that Rick Campbell has. You know what I mean? So at least in BC. So, it's a complex thing, I think. And I'm still, it's a real shame that BC came out there and performed like that. I think that was, unacceptable, sure. And I know everyone there knows that, but it's tough. It's tough. And I think, again, now we have to start asking these harder questions that maybe we tried to avoid before.
Yeah, I got your meme up here. I made that, tweeted that out here. If you see that, like Winnipeg, Toronto.
There you go. There you go.
James has a good comment. The Lions have been listening to the media too much. The bomber derangement syndrome caused the media to crown BC way too early. I would co-sign that. Jason, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, like, I still think BC is going to be a pretty good team going forward. I think they'll shake this off, but these last 2 games are really going to cost them first place in the West Division. And I think that's the reality of the situation. And I think they needed to host the West Final more than Winnipeg did. And that just looks like it's, not going to be a possibility anymore. And I think that, it's weird because they didn't really have too much pushback in this game. Whereas in that game against Saskatchewan, they came roaring back and almost won it at the end. Against Hamilton, they couldn't get anything going offensively. And I think that, I think some of that has to do with the Tiger Cats coaching staff and their familiarity with Vernon Adams from his time with Montreal. And I think they put together a really good game plan for him. But some of it was just mistakes that BC was making in this one. Javon Couture had a big fumble. They had a couple of big drop passes. They just kind of looked out of sync the entire game on offense. And this defense doesn't look scary to play against anymore like it did about a month ago. So, I mean, just disappointing last couple of weeks for the Lions. I still think they're going to be a good team going forward. But like I said, first place just seems like a long shot at this point.
I saw the tweet as well where it's like, remember when they had, they basically made James Butler, had him their leading rusher, and they traded him away and really did nothing at all to kind of shore that up. Like, you got Mizell here, 9 carries. I mean, Vernon's throwing 40 attempts here, 326 yards. He had like 400, right, in the loss against Saskatchewan. Just remarkable. I had a couple of tweets from Dave I showed before. A stunning result tonight. During my pregame prep, I concluded this was one of the single biggest statistical mismatches of the season. Really puts a jolt in the dynamics of both divisions. And then you had this one. There are just two kinds of upsets in football. One where a bunch of full moon plays happen for the underdog and the favorite team just can't overcome them. And then there's the other where the favorite team just gets flat out beaten tonight in Vancouver. It was the latter. I had then the quote from Vernon. I hate losing, man. I hate it. I hate it more than I like winning, which I do like. I mean, I love Vernon. I don't know. I'm really kind of flabbergasted by this one. And like we said, BC needed to host that West Division final, and I just don't see that happening. Evan, thoughts on this? The Ticats, with Powell, everything else?
Yeah, so before I get into some of the matchup stuff, which I also do find really interesting about this game, the point that Jason brought up and what you touched on about, BC not hosting the West final most likely now, that really sucks. And that, I think, is going to be, we will look back on these two games if BC loses the West final in Winnipeg, and it's going to be the biggest, face palm that you could imagine. Like, it really, because that's what they needed. That has always been the struggle. And again, we've already talked about, their games on the road this year feel so much different compared to their games at home. And that's like, BC's a good team, right? We all know that. Again, great overall roster, great coaching. Everything looks great there. But I think there's teams, with significantly worse records than BC that, probably play better on the road. And that's a big red flag. And I mean, again, maybe I'm being more critical now. Maybe we're talking about more of the red flags because they've lost at home. Like, things are, BC's hitting a rough patch here. They're sort of low patch of the season, just like we talked about Edmonton, reaching their high and Ottawa kind of hitting another low. Like, it sort of goes. The CFL season is so long. I'm starting to notice these waves, kind of trends, things like that. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I think that whole, home and away thing for the playoffs is really, that matters here, I think, more than anything else when you look at, like division-wise, standings, all that good stuff. But I'll get into the game here and things that I thought were interesting from the stat sheet. We'll start with Hamilton. Taylor Powell, I think this was his most complete game. He's had a couple games where it was some good and some bad, and then there was a couple other games where it was just a lot more of, you're telling yourself, okay, he needs to develop more. You can tell he's been quickly thrusted into this role. Again, I'm not going to say he's bad, right? I'm never going to call a player bad. That's just not right. I can't do that. But Taylor Powell, this game really showed, I think, his progression. Now, keep in mind, he didn't have to do a ton because James Butler in his, BC revenge game, this was one of his more complete games of the season. And I think we've talked a lot about James Butler sort of, I don't want to say he looks out of place in Hamilton, but he's been way slower this year than he was last year. And it's just been so, I don't know, it feels like it's been really up and down with him too over the course of the season. So really good to see him get involved. It's a shame that he decided to turn things up against, it's a shame for BC fans like you, Reed. I think the rest, I enjoyed watching him, go out and do that. But yeah, no, I mean, it was interesting. And the one thing that really, I'll switch over to BC here. The one thing that I find just fascinating about this team, the Lions, win or lose, Vernon Adams still has these incredible passing days. Like, their offense, even on a losing day, still feels like they can churn out a ton of yardage, especially through the air. On the ground has been, mixed bag. Mazzell has been, again, they've got some work to do there. I think losing Butler has really hurt them. And ironically, again, Butler tore him up this game, or at least the defense. But yeah, you look at Vernon Adams. I mean, 326 yards in a loss. They only put up 13 points, and he still had 300 plus yards. And once again, look at that. You go down to the receiving column. You've got a 100-yard receiver in Keon Hatcher, 7 catches, 107 yards, 1 touchdown. Like, it is amazing to me how, like, I feel like every time this team loses, which they've got 4 losses now, so it's starting to become, they were what, 7-2, 7 and something. Yeah. So now it's 7-4 because they've lost the past 2. Now it's starting to become a more common theme. Yet they still have such a potent passing attack. I see things like that in college football where, teams will lose and put up a ton of yards. But I don't know, seeing it like at this level is extremely interesting. And I think that again, it speaks to just how well-rounded this team is. Like, I will still give the Lions praise, even though they're going through a tough time here, because even when they lose, I still feel like they have a somewhat entertaining product. A lot of it just comes from mistakes. And to be entirely honest, I think a lot of the blame can be put on the defense in the past couple weeks, really for most of their losses. I just don't feel like the offense, has been, as much of I don't want to say problem, because I still feel like BC's defense is a complete unit as well. But like, there's no denying. I mean, the Winnipeg game, Saskatchewan was just a close one. I don't know if that was really on either side, but this one definitely felt like a bit of a weird mismatch for BC's defense. And again, it's out of character. It definitely makes you question things. I still think BC will be good, but let's put it this way. This is the last thing I'll say before I give it back to somebody, because I've been talking for too long. But if BC goes to Winnipeg again and loses in the West Final again, is that really a successful season? Like, is that really what you went out and wanted to do? No. Like, this team, we know this team can go out and win a Grey Cup under the right circumstances. I believe that. Okay, I'm a firm believer that they can go out and win a championship. I look at their roster, again, coaching, everything that we've already talked about. I combine all that, and I'm like, this is a championship caliber team. But, you have to get over the hump. You don't want to be called, you don't want to be one of those teams. I don't know. There's a couple examples in the NFL in recent years, like maybe the Saints, where it's the classic regular season team. You can win, and then it comes time for the playoffs where it's instant elimination and you don't know what to do. And it sucks. That's I think almost worse. Like Vernon had his quote. He said, "I hate losing more than I like winning." That's almost, in my opinion, worse. Like, if you're a good team in the regular season that constantly loses in the playoffs, than just being one of those teams that has a losing record and doesn't go at all, because you feel like all of your accomplishments have gone out the door. And again, that's a conversation that's up for debate, how you feel about that and how you feel about certain teams' records. But I just can't imagine how crushing it would be for this BC team to go to Winnipeg again and lose. I'm not saying it's going to happen. They could, surely pull it out and surprise everybody. But it just doesn't look that way right now. And I just feel like if they lose that game, because I think they can get through the rest of the regular season fine. But if they lose that game against Winnipeg that we've talked about so much that we think is going to happen, we're like 99% sure is going to happen. If they lose that, first of all, it's a disappointment, but then you start thinking about next year. Like, will they have the same personnel, to get to be in that same position, or are guys going to leave, explore new opportunities? Do they where is the confidence level? That's my big question there in the locker room.
No, that's where I'm at, and I want to get Jason's thoughts on the Ticats as well. I have a tweet. Last year when we were getting ready for the Grey Cup show, I remember talking with a lot of the BC people, and this was kind of like post Nathan and Vernon was there, and they're like, well, no, like we really we're hoping to be there, like we're hoping to be in the Grey Cup or in the conference. I'm like, okay. I mean, there was a little bit of delusion last year, right? I think Vernon kind of held that ship as long as he did. We're basically like, we didn't just throw away the season, but it really never felt like they were competitive at all after Rourke went down. It felt like, in my mind, I'm like, this could happen this year. They're that dominant. And that's just all totally gone out the window. Jason, I had a tweet here from the Black and Gold. Let this be a turning point for the Ticat season, talking about, held BC at home and kind of all this stuff. Do you view that as that, or do you view it as BC giving it away?
I think it was the most complete effort the Ticats have shown this season by far. And I think that even in the games that they had won previously, their 3 other wins, I don't think they looked very convincing. And I think in this game, they just came out with a complete game plan. Probably the most shocking thing to me was just the fact that Hamilton was just gashing BC's defense with the run every single play. Like, it seemed like BC never really had the ball in this one. Even though Vernon threw the ball 40 times, it felt like Hamilton had the ball for the vast majority of this game. And James Butler just simply was the man in this one. The offensive line, making holes for him up front. But I think Butler against his former team was just a different kind of motivation for him. And I think for the defense, I think that it was easily their best game of the season. And I think that, like I mentioned before, I think the Ticats coaching staff is very familiar with Vernon Adams from his time with Montreal. So I think they were able to game plan and, know his tendencies a little bit. So I think that played into it. And I think that, they tackled very well. They generated a few takeaways, and they also had a huge third down stop on the first possession for BC that really set the tone for the game. So I thought I was very impressed, and it was totally unexpected for me as a Ticats fan. I mean, almost all Ticats fans were expecting a loss in this one, but the CFL is a weird league sometimes, and you can't really explain it.
Yeah, that's what I learned. And I remember a couple years ago, and I did fantasy. We all did it with the hub people, kind of the first season of that. And I just don't have time. But yeah, you'd set up this, and okay, I got whoever, and it was so unpredictable. And that's why I've always said, like, I'll never bet on sports, because, like, God forbid, I've said enough about this stuff. Can't imagine that. The other question I had for Jason was, the OC, we're switching the coach. Like, do you attribute a lot to that as well here, where it's been a couple weeks with the new offensive coordinator?
Well, I think it certainly hasn't hurt. I think that, just having a fresh face in there, I think, Tommy Condell, he had some great years with Hamilton, but I think, switching it up and, I think they're probably still running a lot of his schemes, but sprinkling in a little bit of what Scott Milanovich is bringing to the table week by week here. And I think that the commitment to the running game, like I was saying before, is a big difference, I think, from where they were under Tommy Condell. The Ticats just known notoriously as a pass-heavy team, but that's changed this year in the last few weeks, specifically with James Butler in the fold. So I think, the offensive coordinator change probably is factored in a little bit, but I wouldn't attribute it all to that. I think it was just a really good game plan in this one.
We'll move on here. We'll kind of double time the other two games. I had this off the top. I forgot to pull it up. We had the Rich Stubler passing away at 74, I believe, yesterday, or at least over the weekend. Wanted to make sure we commented on that. I probably have the least amount of notes for the Stampeders Argos game. We were at the Mariners Kansas City game on Friday. I guess we'll go first, Evan, on this. Calgary made an effort here for Mayer kind of waking up a little bit. I saw some memes earlier in the week. Ryan, one of the friends of the show, like, Mayer on the wall. Will I throw a touchdown at all or whatever? But what did we make of this? Toronto still taking care of business like championship caliber teams do.
Yeah, I mean, oh no, I'm glad. That was good, Reed. That was good. No, but I think Toronto. We'll start with Calgary. I think regardless of how maybe disappointing Calgary has been this season, they'll always give Toronto a run for their money. I don't know what it is, but, like, those guys just know how to play against Toronto, like, figuring things out. Unfortunately, they still couldn't get the job done, but this game was way more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. I thought Toronto was going to beat the brakes off them. I know Calgary won last time, but again, bit of different circumstances there. I expected this to be sort of more like the Winnipeg Montreal game was, but it wasn't. I mean, Jake Maier, we had said last week, we really kind of did a deep dive on Jake Maier and just, how bad his struggles have really been, pointing out some of the stats that have really, again, all looked like in the wrong direction this season. Everything has not looked great on his end, but every time you say that, like, he has these games, like, it just he kind of comes out of nowhere and decides to dominate again. And I can't really put my finger on why that is. Maybe it just has to do with opponent and when the game is or whatever. I don't know. Sometimes there's weird criteria like that. But regardless, Jake Maier, again, this is the Jake Maier I thought we were going to get really this entire season. Now, I don't know. This was still a pretty exceptional performance by that standard. But, you're talking about Jake Maier, like, it was so difficult for him to get to 200 yards per game. And here he is getting close to 400, no interceptions. I mean, it was he's had a couple games this year, where he really did ball out. But this one, I think, felt the most complete. There was high yardage, high touchdowns, but it still felt the most complete. And yes, Calgary lost, so maybe you take some points off for that. But I don't know. I still enjoyed it. I think it was a relief on my end, because I don't know. Like, if Jake Maier, I feel like, we were at a point last week where it was like, if Jake Maier even has a couple more of these, sub 200-yard games where they can't score in the red zone, they might just, once you realize your season's, over, you might just be putting somebody else in and seeing how that works out. To did I think that was going to actually happen? I don't know, but it certainly seemed like a possibility in my head. Now, obviously, Jake Maier, it looks like he's proved himself again. But the guy really here that I want to talk about for Calgary before we get into Toronto's side of the ball is Reggie Begelton. So I've mentioned Reggie Begelton a couple times on the show this season, but he missed a couple games due to injury. And again, the passing offense just hasn't really been anything to write home about. So he hasn't done a lot. But, Reggie Begelton for a while has been one of the more, I think, intriguing CFL receiver prospects. And boy, did he show it in this game. I mean, this was one of the best, receiving performances you could ask from any receiver. He looked like one of the best receivers in the league in this game. And I mean, I don't know, the stat line, like he was targeted a bunch, he was getting fed, but even Mark and Michelle, had 4 for 82 and a touchdown. Like even that, once the passing offense opens up, I know that these receivers can do great things. Like I do think Reggie Begelton is one of the better receivers in the CFL, which is the point I'm getting at, but no one would really know that this season because Calgary hasn't done much throwing the ball. Now we finally had an opportunity, where he could get worked into the offense, and it's been shown. Definitely. I mean, going over 200 yards in a game at receiver and scoring twice is ridiculous. I mean, that's, think about how many fantasy points that is if you want to get back on that fantasy discussion. But no, I mean, it was good to see at least a bit of a spark from Calgary. They still didn't win, so it doesn't feel as exciting. It definitely doesn't help things out. That's I
that
saw.
Took me
I remember when you said that in the chat.
It took me time to find here.
Yeah. No, but Calgary didn't win, so I don't know. It definitely makes things feel less exciting. And to be honest, that it almost feels like a nail in the coffin of their season. I'm not going to say that now because they played really well in this game. But just looking at the record and everything, I mean, hell, they're getting like Edmonton's getting close to them now, which is staggering. I mean, that's if for somehow, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if Edmonton finishes over Calgary in the standings, they swap spots there for 4th and 5th. That's I don't know. If you're a Stampeders fan, I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss at that point. But I won't get into that. I mean, now we're just kind of cracking meaningless jokes. So I'll get into Toronto here briefly. Do I really need to say anything about them? No, because they do the same thing every week now. That they're starting to get we've talked about how they kind of resemble Winnipeg in the sense that they're extremely consistent, and even when they make mistakes, they can come back from them. Again, that's that's why they won the Grey Cup last year and probably have a good chance of doing it again this year. But I look at, Chad Kelly, this wasn't a flawless game by him by any means. It was definitely a bit slower by his standards, throwing 2 picks. And yeah, he had a ton of yards, but he could have completed a couple more too. Wasn't flawless, but 4 total touchdowns. So that helps. I don't think anyone's going to argue against him. All around, yeah. I mean, AJ Ouellette, I feel like he has the same stat line every week, just extremely efficient, close to 100 yards, 70, 80 range. DeMonte Coxey, we've seen, I feel like, I don't know. I don't want to say he's one of the top receivers in the CFL yet, but he's had so many good plays this season where I think the potential is, I mean, he could be, maybe top 5 at some point. I don't know. I've really liked watching his game over the course of the season. Tavares Daniels, is someone I'm extremely familiar with. Again, another good game. Andrew Harris had a touchdown in this game, which I thought was really cool. We don't talk about Andrew Harris a lot anymore because he's in an extremely reserved role in Toronto behind AJ Ouellette. And he's really old. He doesn't need to get that much work in because I don't even know how old he is. What, 30 something, mid 30s.
He's old.
He's really old. I don't know. To me, I always call him the Frank Gore of the CFL. Whenever I'm talking to my friends about Canadian football, I'm like, well, there's a guy playing up there right now who's essentially the equivalent of Frank Gore. He just won't stop. He's still playing. 36. That's ridiculous. But overall, this game, I expected Toronto to win. They did. Flow went a bit differently than I expected. But ultimately, it is what it is. Now it's time to move on. I don't know. It was. I didn't watch much of this game either. So I don't know. I'm not going to ramble about it for too long. I think there's more to talk about there with Calgary, though, ultimately, than the Argonauts, because we just know what to expect from them at this point.
Yeah, Jason, is there enough spark of life here with Calgary?
Yeah, I think that, if the games with Edmonton and Calgary, if either of those teams sweep those back-to-back games, I think it could change the season for either of those teams. Definitely think there's good things to take away from this game if you're Calgary offensively. But, I mean, at the end of the day, they just didn't make the plays necessary at the end of the game to win. And that's just been the case far too often this season with them. I think that, just to touch on Reggie Bagleton again, I had a video that I did before the 2022 season where I ranked my top 15 CFL wide receivers. And I actually had Reggie Bagleton ranked at number 1 in the CFL. And I thought, when I saw him in this game, I said, there's that guy. There's that guy that can be an elite receiver in this league. And he absolutely was in this one. Fortunate that he wasn't able to come away with the victory, but at the end of the day, I think there's still some positivity to take away from this game if you're Calgary. For Toronto, I think that Kelly faced some adversity through the 2 picks, like Evan said, but he also made several big-time throws down the field. He has great chemistry with Davaris Daniels. Davaris Daniels really making good on his potential that he's shown his entire CFL career. This is a guy that doesn't have an 1,000-yard receiving season, I do believe, in his career, but I think that he's definitely going to reach that this year. He's always had the potential, in my mind, to be one of those top 10 receivers in the league, and he's shown that this season. Another guy in Toronto I want to give a shout out to is Dwayne Hendricks, defensive tackle, had a couple of massive run stops in this one. That's another thing. Calgary really couldn't get the running game going in this one, so that was a good thing from Jake Mayer's perspective, that he was able to move the ball efficiently even without the running game. So I think that, Toronto, same old, like Evan said. I think they're arguably the best team in the CFL still. And for Calgary, I think their season's not completely lost yet, but the losses are piling up.
Yeah, I'm looking here as you were talking, looking forward, we have the Edmonton at Calgary and then the Calgary at Edmonton. Sometimes people poo-poo these home and home, we're playing whatever. I mean, this is kind of, division kind of solidifying stuff here. If like Edmonton could sweep, like you said, that series on that, could be interesting. Let's get to the last game here. I did watch a lot of this one. Felt like Caleros was a little rusty coming back, doing his best Taylor Cornelius impression. And then obviously holding the Alouettes to no points in the second half at all. Interesting here. I wanted to see kind of Cody kind of wake back up again as well after we kind of had the Caleb Evans experience. Let's go to Jason first on this one. This is what championship teams do. Okay, we face adversity. Our quarterback threw 2 pick sixes. I think Zach made the joke I actually threw six touchdowns in this game, whatever. They come back, they shut it down. If this was BC, I would have no faith. They would be flustered and, oh my God, we got to go. They didn't worry about it. They had it. It was tied or they were whatever at half. What do you make of this?
Yeah, this was a fun first half in this one, but ultimately Winnipeg just showed that they are the far superior team. And Montreal is really just showing this season that they can't hang with the big dogs. I mean, all of their 4 losses came against the big 3 teams, if you will, in the CFL. So that trend is continuing. But like you said, Caleros, he really looked rusty in the first half. I think he also threw another interception in addition to those 2 pick sixes. But ultimately, I think he shook it off, and you saw those playmakers really shine for Winnipeg. You just see how much of a complete offense they really are, where they have all those playmakers on the field. Brady Oliveira is having one of the best seasons by a Canadian running back in a long time. I think that Andrew Harris hasn't ever even led the league in rushing before, but I think that Oliveira is by far the leading rusher so far in the CFL this season. So I think he'd be the first Canadian running back to do that in quite some time. And I think that, like you said, it's what championship teams do. They bounce back and they were able to really put the clamps down in the second half. Montreal really didn't get anything going on offense in this entire game. I mean, you take away those 2 pick sixes, they scored 3 points in this entire game. And Winnipeg's defense has really just returned to their elite form after having a shaky start to the season that I was pretty critical of.
Yeah, this reminded me of, it was the was it the West semis 2 years ago? It was Winnipeg versus Saskatchewan, and like they Winnipeg, I think, like turned the ball over 6 times, and like Saskatchewan still lost the game. And you're like, you have to have a day here when your quarterback, like you said, can throw 3 interceptions and you still put up almost a 50 burger here on the Montreal. Different stat line, Evan, than like we've seen for Zach here, but obviously still coming out with the win. What did you make of this? Still throwing 4 touchdowns, incredible.
Yeah, it was an interesting game. First half, I watched this game in its entirety, by the way. First half, yeah, it felt very competitive in the first half. Really felt like Montreal had a shot. They were playing extremely well. I'll give a shout out to I'll talk about Winnipeg first, but I can't talk about this game without mentioning Marc-Antoine Dequoy first for Montreal. Love that guy. I love the way that guy plays, and that was I think I maybe mentioned him when Montreal had that game against Toronto back last month in July. The back and forth game, the one that we all really liked too during that crazy week. I really like Marc-Antoine Dequoy, safety. Alouettes. I don't know, just really, really. He had a really good performance in this one. Obviously, it wasn't enough. Like Winnipeg pulled away, but that guy has some serious potential. And I'm glad to see that Montreal has found. I mean, shout out to their personnel department. They have found a lot of guys. Like Austin Mack has been an immediate impact player in his first year in the league, and just guys like that really, really stand out. And it takes from someone who now does personnel work, like it takes it's a long process to find guys that can do stuff like that and that can really get involved. But anyway, I won't get too sidetracked. For Winnipeg, yeah, it was really, I don't know, it was a very strange day for Zach Collaros. Now, obviously, they pulled away. Zach didn't even have to play the whole game. But he had some just miscues, and I think that's part of, you're coming off a game, you've been injured, you're warming up again. It happens, Montreal's defense has some good pieces too. Like I think 2 of those picks went to Dequoy. So that there's that. So if you take away those, that there's only 1 interception. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said before about Winnipeg, the same thing applies here. It's every time you think this team is going to lose or do something stupid or act up, they pull their things together and they just go get the job done. And you would have never even thought about it twice. I mean, it's honestly incredible. Like, during the second quarter of that game, it didn't look like it was even possible for Winnipeg to maybe get to 30 points that night. And they got damn near 50. So I think that really speaks again to that. It's just a mentality. It's like, we can only do, whatever happened in the past, like we can't change that. Now we have to, go out there and just get the job done and, just take it play by play. Don't focus on what happened before, only focus on what you can do in the future. I'm starting to sound like a coach now, but you get the point. Like I really think that's what the mentality is there. And that's why they can just keep doing this, week after week, month after month, year after year now. It's honestly just, it's one of the greatest, no one, I mean, people really care. I mean, well, let me put it this way. This is a bit off topic, but I want to bring it up anyway while we're talking about sort of Winnipeg and the whole dynasty. A lot of people look to Edmonton and their 22-game home losing streak or whatever, and people who weren't fans of the CFL knew about that. But there's not enough people who don't follow the CFL who are aware of how good the Blue Bombers are as a football team, because I don't think people understand. Like, it's very rare to see this kind of success at any pro football level. I mean, the Blue Bombers are almost, I mean, they're getting to a point where, I mean, if they go out and win the Grey Cup this year, you're looking at like, Patriots kind of thing, dynasty level. You could honestly argue that they're, again, different leagues. I get it. I'm not trying to draw any direct comparisons, but like, in terms of just winning cultures and things like that, that they're so consistent, it's hard to find that. You think about, college football, what would the equivalent be for Winnipeg? Probably Alabama. Pains me to admit that, but it probably is. They set a standard, and things just like they just win like it's nothing. It's just, it comes naturally to them. They still have their mishaps here and there. Okay. Even the greatest winners in the world don't win all the time. Greatest teams, greatest people, whatever. Everyone has their moments, but like Winnipeg, it's just so, I wish more people in sports media, like I'm not saying like these people have to, become like CFL homers or whatever we call them, right? But I think it would be nice if like a team like Winnipeg could get some more coverage for what they've been doing, because the reality is like, I mean, yeah, there was the COVID season, and yeah, they lost the Grey Cup last year, but they've been in 3 straight championship games. And if they win the Grey Cup this year, I absolutely think there needs to be more coverage here in the U.S. about that team specifically. If there's one CFL team that I nominate to be sort of, the team that people know here, I mean, now we're getting into like America's CFL team territory, which Reed has already claimed to be the Lions. But maybe I take the Bombers just because, like, again, they're so successful, and I feel like people would. I don't know if they gravitate towards that. I'm not necessarily saying, this is a pull for more American fans, but like, I just feel like this team is so damn good, like in all of sports in general, but no one talks about it. So I don't know.
A couple things here I want to get, Jason. I had this where the Montreal, the famous air horn guy, and I thought this was funny, pumping out the L's. I did comment on this. I said, seriously, F this guy. Like that is my one problem with the CFL is like, let's let this one guy who's having fun take over this entire experience. I had a tweet here, friend of me of the show, Ballsy, talking like Caleb Evans should be the starting quarterback. Jason, what did you make of this? Montreal, Cody looked shaky. Like you said, the offense not really doing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could argue both quarterbacks looked rusty at points in this game. But I think Caleris's struggles, I think, manifested itself as in turnovers, whereas for Fajardo, really was just an off game from him. And I think, like I said, I attribute it a lot to Winnipeg's defense really rounding into form. And I think that it'll take a couple more weeks like this to really be concerned about Fajardo, because I think Fajardo's largely been pretty good this season. I don't think that Caleb Evans is a full-time starter in this league. Played a couple of really good games, but I think that, Fajardo really is the starter for this team. I don't think going to Evans full-time is an option. So, I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned just yet for Fajardo in Montreal.
The last note I had on this game, I did watch this one as well. Once it was, I kind of turned it off here at the end of the fourth when it was up a lot. I will just say, Marshall Ferguson is becoming, is moving to a different level here in terms of, like we're tweeting shirtless videos. We're blaming rain delays. I used to work in TV, and I always used to say, like, I cover the news. I don't make the news. I think Marshall needs to cover the CFL and not be the CFL now. I don't think Marshall is playing in the CFL game. I don't like this. This bothers me, and it kind of upsets me. And I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. Otherwise, business as usual. Winnipeg. Evan, anything else here? We'll start kind of putting this show to bed here pretty soon. Luis says, question is why there's not a CFL live show that covers the league weekly. I agree. I think the CFL kind of lives and dies and, Sunday, and then it goes away. I like doing the Monday show, but, and like now when they're going to go to double headers or whatever, like you really kind of do lose that week, weekday kind of stuff. I know Twitter exists and all that stuff. Evan, anything else from you?
No, I don't think so. Interesting point about Marshall Ferguson. Personally, I like Marshall. I think he's a cool dude, but I get it.
And then we had here, we're talking where I'll get it up here, the trade for bandwagon. Jason, anything else from you on here?
No, I think that covers just about everything for this game.
Where is this again here? Oh yeah, Coach Phillips talking. Now y'all don't jump on the trade for bandwagon. Now y'all the ones praying for this. Farhan, we're jumping aboard, getting on board the trade for bandwagon. Excited to hear about that. I guess let's look ahead really quick. Games next week. Let me get that up here. Week 13, BC at Montreal. Jason, are we expecting anything different? I mean, BC's had a couple of bounce back games here, but now Montreal is probably the stiffest competition they face in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's worth noting that BC has traditionally struggled when they've traveled to Montreal to play. I believe they lost there last year, so I think that's worth pointing out. I mean, I think that all 4 of these games, when you look at it, have some juice to them when you look ahead to next weekend, so I'm really excited for the week ahead.
Yeah, I just thank God for the Mariners leading the AL West right now. I couldn't handle, Commanders undefeated in preseason. That's going strong. Mariners here. We've had 2 8-game win streaks in the last month. But yeah, BC is really kind of struggling here. Evan, anything standing out for you for games ahead here?
Yeah, overall, it's a good slate. BC Montreal, I mean, first game of the week, that one could definitely be interesting. I just, with the way BC's playing now, I mean, this is... It's pretty much a must-win game for them, I think. Not that it's, like not that their season's on the line, but just to kind of, salvage. Well, I don't even know if salvage is the right term, but just to get back to the way things were a couple weeks ago. That's the bottom line. But yeah, honestly, all these games, like Jason said, have some potential. Even like Winnipeg at Saskatchewan, Toronto at Hamilton. I don't know. I feel like Toronto will take that one still. Edmonton and Calgary, that's like 50-50 split for me. I have no idea. And that one's going to matter a lot too, because if Edmonton wins that, Calgary and Edmonton will have the same number of wins, which is just unbelievable. They have the same record. They'll both be 3-9, which is I don't know. The fact that that's even like maybe we haven't talked enough about Calgary this season, but I'm going to save that for another day.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Like I said, should be good. Make sure you're subscribed. I know Jason will do his stuff, his previews and everything else on his channel. Remember, we got Randy Ambrosi coming up on Friday. I got to send a couple more emails. I think Pat's coming on to do the XFL with cut down day with the NFL here coming up. And then still trying to work on some interviews, but should be a good show. Like I said, 17 minutes or so with the commissioner. I thought it was good. Like I said, I asked him, like, what do you want your legacy to be? And he kind of BS'd at first. And I thought he kind of had a good answer where, you kind of got to get, I think, like it was the same thing when I had Amar Doman on before. Like, I think you got to get past about the first 10, 15 minutes of like, okay, here's all my pre-programmed sound bites that I say. I think once you get past that, I think you get a little bit of gold. But I thought Randy was good. I like him a lot. I know he gets a lot of slack, but I thought that it was a good interview. Evan, appreciate it. Good luck at college this week. Jason, everything else, and staying up till, 5 a.m. watching the game. Like I said, thanks everyone. And yes, Luis, I did ask him about expansion. So we get all of that stuff. Should be good. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next time. Cheers.